Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm so happy to bring to you our kickoff webinar. And this is a webinar series that will be focusing on the Informs IAAA nominees and winner. What does it mean? Let me introduce myself. My name is Priya Sarathy. I am a member of the board of the Analytic Society of Informs and also the president of the Atlanta chapter. Now, IAAA is the Innovative Applications in Analytics Award. Every year, we solicit submissions from the analytical community and recognize their creative and unique application of analytic techniques. The prize promotes a creative combination of analytic techniques and the use of novel insights that they extract to have an impact on the economic value or the social value in our community or in the organizations that we work with. Some areas of submission have come from predictive or prescriptive innovation, others in the way data sources have been collected to make sure that the accuracy of the techniques are feasible, viable, and sustainable. Sometimes many multiple combinations of these approaches are brought together because of the challenges that the problem presents to us. So many of these collaborations demonstrate how just a simple idea around a business, a challenge that an organization, in our case, in today's talk, a nonprofit, faces, which hinders their optimal delivery of the value that the organization has a vision or sights on. So we brought together the different teams so we can understand how teams are working on problems and solving it as a part of applied analytics. So we're starting the series today by talking to each of these teams who submitted their work and were selected as top nominees for the award. I should also put in a plug-in for 2025. The analytic conference, not the annual conference for Informs is in October this year, and you can submit your project work to the IAAA award website, which I shall post in the chat as well. Okay, so let's move on and let me introduce you to the team that we're talking to today. This team has demonstrated a high quality of thought and design and impact. Going through their submission and reading the impact that they projected as having and talking to them today, we will see how truly global their work can have an impact on. So today we have 2 of the 6 team members who were nominated for the award. The team was a collaboration between University of Toronto, Ottawa, University of Singapore, and the Roger Hixon Ontario Human Milk Bank. Some of the members of the team were Timothy Chan, Deborah Connor, Professor Timothy, Ian Zhu, and from the Roger Hixon Ontario Milk Bank, we had Debbie Stone and Shara Unger. The 2 other team members who are here with us today are Rafid Mahmood, who is an assistant professor in the University of Ottawa, Telfer School of Management, and Rachel K. Wong, who is a PhD student in the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering, University of Toronto. Having talked to them a little bit beforehand, I realized that Rachel is one of the key members whose idea it was to go and explore this problem or this challenge presented to her during her graduate studies. So I'm going to take that as a lead and have Rachel introduce us and talk to us a little bit more about what she's currently doing and how she got involved in the project. Rachel?
Perfect. Thanks, Priya. So I'm currently, as Priya said, doing my PhD. I'm doing some more milk bank research, as well as some other projects in optimizing operations at nonprofit organizations. So I got involved in the project during my second year undergrad, actually. So U of T offers these summer grants that you can do. And my supervisor at the time had attended the talk, still my supervisor, not just at the time. And there was somebody presenting. They ran a large study at a milk bank in Texas, and it so happened that Sharon Unger, who was the medical director of our milk bank, was there. So they connected, and then Tim basically said, "Can you go to the milk bank and just kind of investigate, shadow some people, and see if there's any kind of project that we could pursue from an operations research perspective?"
And so, how did that take off? So this was part of your undergrad project, and it's now grown into your PhD thesis focus.
Yeah, so it started as an undergrad project. I did it for my fourth year thesis, and it actually became my entire like master's project. So the time that we were running the larger piece of this project was during the 2 years of my master's.
Okay, so let's start off and let's give the audience a flavor of the project by giving us some background on what is it about the milk donor market and what it particularly is the role it's playing that you got fascinated by to kind of work with them.
Sure, yeah. So to provide some context on sort of the donor milk market, as measured in 2020, there are over 700 milk banks that operate across 66 countries. Um, and this is really a critical resource because globally there's about 15 million infants who are born preterm. And many of these, most of them actually don't have access to a full supply of their own mother's milk. And in such cases, the World Health Organization recognizes donor milk to be the standard of care. So hopefully, if you have an infant, they're born preterm, and you don't have enough milk to feed them, then you can access a milk bank. In Canada specifically, there's about four different donor milk banks located on Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, and Quebec. Um, and so when I started kind of at the milk bank, I was just helping them with different tasks. Basically, Tim was like, just do whatever they kind of want you to do and kind of learn about it, which I think was really critical for me, because I got to learn about the NIC unit, so the neonatal intensive care unit. I got to talk to donors. I built boxes for shipping the milk. Um, and I also did a lot of research into the medical literature. So I was reading a lot about how milk banks operate, how they're used, why donor milk is so important for preterm infants. And one of the things that kept coming up when we were discussing things with the team at Rogers Hixon and through literature was this idea that the inherent variability in the nutritional content of human milk is really a challenge, especially for milk banks, because they want to produce donor milk that essentially has consistent and reliable macronutrient content. And macronutrient content is essentially fat, protein. These are things that help you form your development, so the formation of your brainstem and all of your neural connections and things like that. Um, so for preterm infants, they really have these precise and critical nutritional needs. And if donor milk banks can't provide donor milk that is consistent in nutritional quality, this really impacts blood growth levels and it can have short-term and long-term health impacts. And so one of the things that we wanted to try to address was, okay, we know that this is an issue, and we know that there's processes in the milk bank that they use to try to deal with this nutritional variability, but they haven't been that effective so far. So maybe there's something we can do there.
So, don't they have ways to measure these instruments already, or is it something that was also another challenge?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So globally, basically every single milk bank struggles with this. And a fraction of them are can use something called a human milk analyzer. It's this piece of technology. It was actually FDA approved recently in the US, to measure the macronutrient content of donor milk. And essentially, what you do is you put a small sample in, so about 1 milliliter, and it will output sort of some measurement of your fat and protein content. The issue with that is that it's not approved in Canada and it's not really approved in a lot of countries. Um, and it's super expensive. So for milk banks that are operating in countries in lower income, you have issues with even being able to access this kind of technology. And Rogers Hixon certainly didn't have any kind of analyzer. So what they were doing was kind of doing it blind, using kind of a rule of thumb to try to determine how much macronutrient content was in each donation.
Okay, thank you. So now I want to turn to Rafid. Rafid, if you can introduce yourself and your current role and work that you're doing before I ask you the question on this project.
Sure, yeah. So thanks, Priya. I'm Rafid. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Ottawa in the Telfer School of Management. So a lot of my work revolves around the use and development of analytics tools, specifically usually predictive tools and AI. And so I guess throughout this webinar, we'll find how predictive analytics and AI will fit into this whole pipeline.
Okay. So we last heard from Rachel pointing out to the analyzers that it is the very expensive, and they lack that ability to have this across all the milk banks. So one piece of information in your presentation caught my eye, which talks to that yours approach that you took up was the first data-driven optimization framework for donor milk pooling to help non-profit milk banks without an analyzer to optimize the quality and consistency of their produced milk. So tell me more. Can you walk through the process of what that means and how you built that framework up?
Sure, yeah. So I think like the one thing we should mention as a caveat, obviously different milk banks will have different sort of metrics that they may or may not want to go for. But as Rachel mentioned, at a high level, we're interested in things like the quality of milk measured in terms of macronutrient content and consistency. Now, you have essentially all of these donations that are coming in, right? So mothers are donating milk, right? Is going to have a lot of varying quality from donation to donation, and this leads to this idea of pooling, where the idea is that if you take a bunch of different donations together and you just kind of pool them together and average them out and blend things, then you should have some reasonable average or level of quality, right? So maybe milk with fewer macronutrients can blend with milk with higher macronutrients. Now, uh, the milk analyzer, if this existed and if milk banks had an infinite amount of resources, then what they could do is just go and measure every single milk donation that comes in, write down exactly what the macronutrient levels of every donation is, and then kind of just solve essentially some large scale optimization problem. So this massive prescriptive problem where they can figure out exactly what is the optimal way to pool donations together, just to make sure that every single pool that is being produced has some, let's say, minimum standard of quality, so some minimum level of fat and protein content, or you want to make sure that there's some degree of consistency, or if there's other metrics like wastage that you want to try and prevent, you can settle for all of those, or if you have more custom constraints, everything can kind of be incorporated. Um,
So,
but
so, so, so what you're saying is, let me just clarify. The pool is what you're trying to get different qualities of milk, pull it together, create an average, and then that averaged pool of milk is kind of measured in some way, hopefully, as
Mhm.
the quality. And they are then bagged so that all babies who are going to receive them get a fair quality of, say, milk
Exactly.
proteins and things like that. Okay, please continue.
Exactly, yeah. But essentially, if we want to try and do this in this way, the challenge is that we would have to analyze every donation that comes in, and this is really the rub, right? If there's all of these donations that are coming in week by week, it's not like the milk banks have a tremendous number of resources to actually go and do this. Um, and so, what many milk banks may resort to, or you can think of a very standard heuristic, may be to leverage some high-level descriptive information about donations, right? If you know certain information about how kind of donor facts might correlate with milk quality, or even in the absence of that, just use sort of policies that try to minimize wastage or other metrics beyond quality or consistency, right? So maybe do something like a first in, first out to make sure that you're never going to let milk expire. Um, but this doesn't actually address the core problem of quality and consistency. And so to try and actually address this. We take this data-driven approach where we combine both predictive and the prescriptive aspect of this. And the predictive aspect behind this is really to try and estimate the macronutrient content in every donation that's coming in based off of donor level information or based off of information regarding the sample, right? So think about when the milk was produced, right? When it's coming in, that sort of information that is generally accessible, for example, via surveys from donors, or that things that donors would typically be able to just fill out at the time when they're sending these milk donations in. We can leverage that in itself to try and predict exactly how much macronutrients or fat and protein is in every donation, and then use these estimates in a way to solve this prescriptive problem of trying to optimize for quality and consistency.
So, so you told me how you were thinking and how you already envisioned the different ways in which you're going to bring descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. And so right now, the first in, first out is based on qualitative checks of who donated it, is the economic background of the mother substantial, that they're going to be, well, getting the right nutritions to generate the quality of milk that has the right nutrition or a better quality of nutrition. So tell me a little bit more about those factors or the features that you saw in descriptive that came up that kind of shot in your, oh my God, this is what we have, this is what we're going to be using to drive that whole rest of the prescriptive analysis.
Do you mean like I guess like what are the things that actually do lead to good predictions essentially, right?
Well, actually, before you get to the prediction part, I wanted to look at what was it from the descriptive analysis that kind of popped in your mind about the quality milk factors, the factors that affect quality of the milk.
I see. So there's some like this is obviously like a very well studied field in terms
Mhm.
of nutrition, and there's a lot of high level analysis that has been done on looking at things like the status of the infant, for example, the information the infant as in the donor infant, information about when the first donation bag, or at what stage of that infant that infant is at the time when the donor is like sending this milk in. Things like how much milk the donor is providing. So there's high level correlations
Mhm.
that do tie up to this. And so there's things essentially going back to this first in, first out. There's some high level understanding that you don't want to use milk that's too late, that's too soon to expire, for example, when producing these pools.
Okay, great. Thank you. So given this, that we have an idea of what is important on the actual quality of the milk, Rachel, can you kind of now talk to me about how you collected the data for this analysis, this project, for you to dig deeper now that you have a good backdrop of what it is you're looking for, right?
Yeah, sure. So this might be very boring, because it was pretty typical data collection. Um, we did do some work to try to understand how many data samples we needed to collect, like so sample size calculations and things like that. Um, a lot of the data we collected was essentially data that the milk bank already had.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we didn't really ask them to collect anything new.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we did collect was milk samples. So we knew that we needed to ensure, like, have some kind of controls. So control of like how much volume was coming into the milk bank, what the quality of the donations were coming in from certain periods of time. We know that, like Rafid said, there's a lot of factors that can affect um, the nutritional consistency, and these can vary seasonally, actually. So we did collect samples of milk. We collected donor features, and then we collected samples of donations and then samples of pools. And from there, we took all of those samples, we froze them in negative 80 degrees, and then we actually analyzed them using a human milk analyzer at a different research hospital that was located nearby.
So that's what I was going to ask. I was thinking whether you took each of those samples, which means you need a lot of sample for an exercise such as this, and we're going through that whole process of manual measurement. So, okay. So that was a big hiccup. I was like, did you have that? Did you have to do every bit of the data labeling yourself?
We did actually. Yeah, so we labeled all our own samples. Um, we actually manually pulled a lot of the files were like file cabinet.
Yeah.
So we actually pulled all of the data. So I was there maybe 2 times a week or 3 times a week for like 4 or 5 hours to pull the data.
So how much data did you collect?
We we collected samples. So in total, we analyzed nearly 700 samples.
Wow.
Um, and we collected features from almost 500 different donors.
Okay, so you were able to track them over time and track, oh my God, that's a lot of
Yeah,
labeling.
it's a lot of labeling. They're changing the system now, so hopefully there will be less data collection. Yeah.
Okay, so you collected the data and now you go to the next stage of defining the goals of the project, what it is that you're going to look for. Was that an easy process, Rafid? Was that something that you said, okay, Rachel and the team have collected the data, we have it quantified, boom, I know what the client wants. Was that a very nice way to, easy way to get to the goals of the project?
Uh, I'm in theory, yes, but I think in any practice of applied analytics, there's always a lot of hiccups and challenges that pop up. So this, for example, required a lot of simulation and a lot of iteration and collaboration with the milk bank for us to get to our final system, our final predictive and prescriptive models. And this is coming from a lot of questions about what are the factors that a milk bank will specifically want. And a milk bank doesn't necessarily want one thing, but they may want a bunch of different things at varying degrees. So you can think, for example, we've talked so far a lot about these ideas of consistency and quality. These are sort of the nominal metrics that we want that everyone kind of wants and is something that ideally we would optimize for. But one of the things that we built with the initial data that Rachel collected was a simulation framework where we could approximate what our predictive and prescriptive policies would lead to over a period of weeks. And so one of the things that we would do is we would run the simulation, develop our models, test them out, and then demonstrate to the client, the milk bank, our collaborators, on what this is going to look like.
Mhm.
And very early on, one of the issues that popped up, for example, was the notion of wastage, which was not something that was that we were aware was going to be such a pressing issue at the time that we just started the project. And this is coming from the fact that if you really want to optimize for milk quality, very, very intuitively, what you could just do is just use only the milk that you know is going to be of high quality, and then milk that you think is going to be of low quality, use it in low doses or low volumes, and eventually just kind of throw that milk out. And so you end up in the service of optimizing for quality, you end up wasting a tremendous amount of milk. And from the perspective of a nonprofit organization that's receiving donations, that also is not a good thing, right? We don't really necessarily want to waste milk as well. And so one of the things that we had to do was incorporate this into our pipeline as a third metric of success, not just quality and consistency of the milk that's being pooled, but how is the milk bank operating over this time? Are they wasting a tremendous amount of milk? Or are they kind of using up as much of the milk as possible, not wasting resources, but also trying to maintain the same measures of quality and consistency. So this is one example, but the essential idea is that we had to iterate over this a bunch of times over several months to kind of show them, okay, well, this is where we are at. What do you think? Do you think that this will affect the milk bank? Do you think this is implementable, or is this going to cause a lot of problems? And then they come give us feedback, and then we go back to drawing board and tweak things. And it takes multiple iterations before we can actually settle on the pipeline that we did implement eventually.
So how much time did you think that took you to get to that iterative cycle to say, okay, we see light, both the client, in this case, the Hixon Milk Center, and you as a team, because there were not just one of you, there were many of you. So how did you come to that? How long did it take to do that iteration?
So this is an area where I think perhaps we could have scheduled this a little bit better, but we originally, essentially, due to the nature of having to run field trials, you sometimes put the cart before the horse and schedule the field trial well in advance. And so that sets our deadline. And so we basically had a deadline that we needed to get this pipeline set up and implemented within say a year or so. And if that's the deadline, that's the deadline, right? And so it took us essentially that full period all the way straight to the last day. And even then, we left space for a warm-up period afterwards to work out any last kinks to make sure that the milk bank can implement our policy and run it during the field trial as well. So it took us basically a full year, and by the end of it, we were trying to iterate as fast as we can to solve out all of the kinks that we needed to get done to get this pipeline ready.
Okay, so which one of you is going to talk to me about this milk recipe, the success factor? How did that happen? And what did you feel that, yes, we got it? What were the measures and metrics within your whole framework, optimization framework, that allowed you to reach to that conclusion? Okay, we got there. I think we have a good formula. Let's stop, or something else.
Sure. I mean, I can give this a shot. So we're essentially playing on three core metrics. That's essentially what it boiled down to, and these three core metrics are what was determined off of all of these iterations with the milk bank, right? So the first two metrics were pretty much determined a priori, and that's this metric of milk pool quality. And pool quality can differ from milk bank to milk bank. For our purposes with Rogers Hixon, what we had decided in consultation with them was that we needed a minimum certain amount of fat and protein content. So I think around 3.5 grams per deciliter of fat in every pool, and around 0.8, 0.9 deciliters of protein in every pool. That was the standard of quality. In terms of consistency, what we wanted was just low variation, so very little variation from pool to pool. So it shouldn't be that, one pool has, a tremendous amount of fat and protein, and then another pool has a low amount of fat and protein. Um, even if both of them are above the minimum thresholds, that variability is not nice. It's not fair. It's not going to lead to better overall outcomes for all of the
Mhm.
infants that are going to receive this. Um, the third metric being this idea of wastage, right? So how many liters of milk are we letting expire over the entire period of the time that this policy is being run? Um, Now, in terms of the actual numbers for expiring consistency, those numbers elude me at the moment. But essentially, those are the three core metrics that we're thinking about. And then there's a whole bunch of kind of secondary factors in terms of making sure that the pooling process kind of adheres to the current practices at the milk bank, right? So making sure, for example, that if, let's say, a donation has a certain volume, we're not going to use up, let's say, 99% of that volume and leave a tiny amount of milk. Because then that becomes arduous for staff. That can lead to bad practices. And so things like that are also things that we want to avoid, that we're trying to
Mhm.
bake in terms of metrics to evaluate with respect to our pipeline.
So what I'm hearing is it's not just you kind of created this ideal recipe that you had, but then given that it could also shift, you made recommendations to your client on how to handle for the other impact. I think, Rachel, you said seasonality has a big impact on what people eat. If you have too many French fries, if the mom's having a lot of French fries, I would say there's a little more fat content, or maybe not. I'm not sure. But those kind of seasonalities might have an impact on the milk quality. So, so you're so could you kind of help me understand a metric that you suggested to them that they could follow easily? Because you just said that you had that constraint working behind your mind as you're developing recommendations for its implementation. Do you have any examples that you could share? Anyone, either Rachel or yeah, you can do it if you.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. So the question is really an example of like a recommendation we made to them based on like some of the findings.
Mhm.
Um, so mainly, so for seasonality, things like that, our predictive models actually captured a lot of that. Um, trying, one of the things we did recommend to them was a lot of times they didn't like to split large deposits. Um, and for that, like Rafid was saying, they were balancing that against staff labor. The more you split, the more labor it takes. And what we kind of showed them through our recipes is that it's actually good to split deposits that have high macronutrient content because then you can use it across multiple recipes. And the trade-off being a little bit more labor. And so we kind of balanced between those factors. And sometimes, if the deposit was small enough, we didn't split it, even though it would have been more optimal to do so.
So, so how did the client receive this and how did they work with you? Because one of the biggest challenges in any enablement process, especially if it's not within your organization, even within organizations, it's a big issue. But you're working with a organization that is constrained, and do they understand how this optimization framework works? So it's like educating them as well about what you've done, the work you've done, and how they should use it, go forward with it. So, can you tell me a bit of that experience that you had? I think you're getting ready to go into production with your framework right now, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
yeah, we're working on implementing it, which comes with its own challenges. I think what worked really well for us, so I was there for the summer and I was there for almost 4 years actually. And so that did build sort of a level of trust. Like even if they didn't fully understand like how our models worked, they trusted us to know like that we understood what they were currently doing and that we understood what our current processes were, um, and that we were very much aligned in terms of the goals of this model that we were trying to test.
So are they kind of looking, or did you put into place something that validates the work, the value of the work that you did? Because is there a before and after? What kind of metrics did you put into place that you can now go and look at, hey, this is what was happening a year or so ago, and with our help with this framework and this milk recipe that you built, we are now serving better quality. I don't know. So, what can you talk to me about how those metrics kind of evolved?
Right. So yeah, we measured a lot of things. So like Rafid said, our main when we were developing these predictor optimized models, we were really looking at like three main metrics. We looked at consistency, we looked at quality, and we looked at wastage. As we implemented this, we realized that we should actually be tracking a lot more secondary things that we didn't really optimize for, but is important to tell the organization, we didn't make the process take more time or become more laborious at the same time while improving the quality of the donor milk you are producing. And one of the key things that we looked at was time to create these recipes. So before, when they were creating recipes, which is basically deciding which donations they should put in a pool, they would have one of the staff members essentially go out and look at sort of um, this visualization, like a whiteboard where they wrote down all of their donations and try to decide what donations to put together. And so one of the things we tracked was how long it took them to do that versus how long it took us to do that. Um, we also looked at things like how many splits. So it's the idea that Rafid was talking about, the more you split a deposit, split meaning you take a certain amount of volume from a deposit and leave the rest in the freezer. Um, And we tried to make sure that so the labor involved was not more for our model versus when they were doing it their way. In the field trial that we implemented, we basically tracked all of these metrics so that we could show them, not only did your consistency and quality of donor milk go up significantly, we also didn't create all of these labor challenges by using our model.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, that just feels incredible. So you're going to face the real challenge once you implement it to be able to track this, collect that, and I mean that'll put this rubber stamp or seal of approval on your success. So that is absolutely wonderful. So as we kind of understood the whole picture now. Were there any things that you would have done differently? I mean, I'll have pass it on to you and then to Rafid.
Um, I think the major thing I felt at the time, and like Rafid said, like we put the cart before the horse. So we sort of had this deadline,
Yeah.
which was good in some ways because, you can spend forever trying to investigate a problem and come up with like the absolute best solution. Um, but I think with more time, we might have done some investigation into, like donor volume trends. So one of the things that we realized when we were implementing is that the volume of donor milk was actually dropping quite significantly. And that was partially because COVID restrictions at the time were being lifted and some moms were going out, which was good, I think. But it did reduce sort of the supply of donor milk. And so we didn't look too much at seasonality in terms of like supply and demand kind of things. And that could have been something that we incorporated. I'll pass it to Rafid. I'm sure he has lots of good thoughts.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think donor volume milk, that was a very interesting that was a very interesting problem that I don't think any of us really anticipated. And until it was actually happening, and then we were freaking out, going, "Oh no, what's going on?" But I think one thing that I have I sometimes wish, but I also sometimes I'm okay that we didn't have to do this. Was this idea that okay, well maybe if we had like another couple months or then we might have even come up with completely different prescriptive frameworks. I think this is a problem that can be tackled in many different ways that have different advantages. So, for example, it might be useful to kind of going back to this, like looking at dynamic trends over time. Can
Mhm.
we kind of make plans on pooling that will make us robust to this potential shift in donor volume that comes out? So that's I think one core issue that if we had time maybe we would like thought about things like that. I think one important thing that would probably have helped Rachel a lot would have been digitized records, right? So I think like Rachel probably spent I don't even know how many hours at the milk bank kind of dealing with a lot of handwritten records and trying to take all of this information that's generally in pen and paper form and turn these into our optimization problem. And this will obviously sometimes
Mhm.
lead to kind of errors in numbers that are wrong, incorrectly written at some point, or some records that are missing, right? So, for example, we think that we have this much milk
Mhm.
available, and then
Mhm.
we solve this optimization problem, and then when we go to the actual fridge, it's like, oh wait, we don't actually have this milk that we thought we did. So I think a lot of that might have been resolved with a little bit of more digitizing
Mhm.
of the record keeping process at the time before the trial. But I believe that the milk bank is now well on its way towards getting that pipeline set up. So I think in the future this will be much smoother.
And I think data quality is a passion project for me as well. And I think having worked with a few projects with nonprofits, that is where the resource crunch is significant. It impacts. And half the time it's like you get the data quality right, then you can do all that beautiful, lovely stuff that we are bringing to your table. So I'm glad. What is it that they're doing? Are they kind of reading up the information or scanning the information to get that quality going? Just one last round of what they did from your recommendation. Obviously, they realized the value they're getting or they will be getting, and they realized, well, if we do this, new changes in their behavior, we'll get more. So it was a value-added investment. Could one of you talk a bit more about what they actually did or are they planning to do rather?
So to speak to sort of the data piece of things, one of the things that they're doing now actually, and that they realize there's a lot of value in doing is digitizing. So before they would write the records and it'd be on the whiteboard and they would just erase them. And they didn't realize that it's really helpful if you can track over time sort of the donations are coming in, how much of them you're using, and things like that. So now every week they actually input into a spreadsheet as well what donations they have.
It's almost a little simple change that makes a
Yeah.
great difference in everything going forward. Anyway, so before we conclude, wanted to ask, is there anything that you wanted to communicate about the project and the work and the collaboration that you both of you did? I mean, it's a big team. So anything about the synergies of working in a big team on a project? Or anything else that you want to talk about. I'll give you each like a couple of minutes on this.
Mhm.
You want to go
Sure.
for who want Rafid, you want to go first? Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, this was a very exciting project. It just combines so many different components, from the modeling aspects towards dealing with a real life problem, getting to a field trial and implementing everything, and actually demonstrating that the methodologies and the frameworks that we've developed uh, provably work in practicality. I think that's been an incredible experience that has shaped a lot of my future thoughts on analytics and especially as an academic on research as well. Um, so I think this is very much motivated my current thoughts on how we should be spending a lot more time and energy on dealing with the real world challenges of implementations, rather than kind of sitting in our offices and developing models and even like getting to the simulation stage. That's nice. If you can demonstrate on a computer using computer simulations that something is going to work, but even the gap from a computer simulation to getting things up and running in a real field trial, is quite large. And I would strongly encourage both myself and anyone else in terms of and to actually continue to push along these endeavors in future research to get to the field trial all the way from the modeling stage all the way to the end.
Actually, yeah, I agree with you. I second that thought because collecting the data, you're having your hands into every aspect throws up a variety of challenges at each stage. And by the time you get through it, it's like, am I swimming against the water or am I just trying to stay afloat kind of a feeling? But you're right. It makes the end result, as you have done it, more relevant and more valuable because it's tailored, it's customized, it is addressing the problem at hand, not your version of the problem at hand. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay. Rachel, what about you?
I echo a lot of what Rafid said. I think I got really lucky to even like when I started at the Milk Bank, I didn't even know there was going to be a project there. Um, and then Rafid joined and he was really like critical to, I don't know what would have done without him. I asked him tons of questions. And so having a large team was really helpful. I could ask Rafid and Ian and Tim for help with developing a lot of the technical details, and having clinical collaborators was really critical as well. Like they actually put a lot of time and consultation into the efforts to bring this. When I started there, I really knew like, oh, I want to build a model and help them solve one of the problems. And so actually seeing that through after 4 years was really rewarding. And I'd echo a lot of what Rafid said. I think there's a lot of papers about, clinical research and how to run a trial properly and how to double blind and things like that. And there's not as much literature on, how to do implementation when you're implementing some kind of operational model. And so we kind of created our own, like, we're going to do study, we're going to do before and after, but whether or not that was the right approach was hard for us to say, really. But yeah, I found the whole project very rewarding, and yeah, I'm really lucky to have worked with everyone.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just interacting with the two of you, I have learned so much that I didn't know. And I mean, the methodology and the approach and the techniques that you have used, part of it comes from thinking through the problem before really jumping the gun on the problem. As you said, Rafid, simulation takes you to a point, but even to do the simulation, you need to have the right concepts and design up in front of you. And I think that's what you've showed. And it's been fascinating learning all this and the work that you've done. So thank you very much. I really, really applaud the work that you've done and the value that it's going to generate. We'll come back and talk to you and see in 6 months how that project is coming along, Rachel. I would love to hear those metrics, show like skyrocket and peak upwards. So, so thank you both. Just for the audience and anybody listening in, again, this was one of a series of webinars that we want to hold, showcasing the IAA Awards nominees and winners. And if you want to learn more about applying for this award at the Inform's website, please look at the link I posted. And if not, look for the uh, Analytical Society's Innovative Application and Analytics Award as the keyword, and you should land on the right page. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining, Rafid and Rachel. It was wonderful getting to know you and talking to you about your project. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Priya.
Thank you.